Just waiting for Bensi to join. I'm sure he will be here in a moment. So bear with us, and he'll be joining us soon. I see there was a small delay due to the clock changing, the daylight saving in Israel. So bear with us a few more minutes.
Hello. I think I can't hear you. Sorry. You muted.
I said, I realize now that we're not in sync because we changed, we manipulated time.
We did manipulate time. Or on your end, the time was manipulated.
On our
Not
end.
yet.
Yes, we manipulated time on our end. All welcome. Hello, Up Cycle Club. Hello, Luke. It's good to have you guys over here. Do you want to add the text?
Yeah, doing it right now.
I recommend everyone taking a look at Grail Country specifically. Luke has been posting some very, very interesting live streams about very relevant topics. So all are welcome to take a look. You had a good week, sir?
Yeah, I did. It was good. The weekend was nice. Yeah.
I don't know if I'm sure you heard the news about they rescued one of the captives.
I did see that.
Yeah, so
that's good.
It was very exciting. It was exciting for me to see. Exciting. It was beautiful for me to see the news anchor sort of tear up when you could see her getting like the news live.
Mm-hmm.
She like yells at the screen, but like really she's yelling at the back office, being like, make sure this is like authentic. Like, I don't want to be saying this again. But it was beautiful just to see how happy she was, because I think all of us are obviously just very happy when one life is saved. I should I know I digress right now because we're talking about other stuff, but the amount of care that is given to a Jewish to the deceased is really remarkable. And you had these groups called the Chevra Kadisha, this group of holy men that is, or Zaka, sorry. This is a group that deals with basically identifying the bodies. But any drop of blood that they can identify that's from the deceased, they try to pick up, absorb, and then bury together with the body, because it's, in the blood we have the nefesh, the spirit. And they later went and looked through all the bodies of the terrorists, and then they identified 4 Jewish Israeli civilians that were like in their shorts or boxers and picked up one of the terrorist guns to keep on fighting. But they went there to keep on looking to make sure that everybody could be accounted for, because the ramifications for her, this deceased wife, and we really definitely see ourselves as other families. So even in this horrible moment of really trying to identify the body, there as well there's a tremendous amount of care for the deceased as well, because we very much still see them as a part of us.
Yeah.
So may we only hear better news on that front, and relief, obviously, to the innocents in Gaza. And may this learning, this studying, be to their merit. All right, let's take it away. We are third chapter, the 11th section over here. Okay. Rabbi Elazar Hamudai Omer, המחלל את הקודשים, והמבזה את המועדות, והמלבין פני חברו ברבים, והמפר בריתו של אברהם אבינו, והמגלה פנים בתורה שלו כהלכה, אף על פי שיש בידו תורה ומעשים טובים, אין לו חלק לעולם הבא. All right, so Rabbi Eliezer of Modi'in, I hear they give us a translation already, okay? Let's say, one who profanes the Kedoshim, the holy things. Here it's constructed for the service of God in the Holy Temple. They just have these add-ons in English. degrades the festivals, humiliates his in public, abrogates the covenant of our father Abraham, i.e., circumcision, or who interprets the Torah contrary to its true intent. Although he may possess Torah knowledge and good deeds, he has no share in the world. So again, we have these intent statements at the end of these sections. So, like we just said, Rabbi Eliezer is from Modi'in. Modi'in is a place that exists still today in Israel. It's around like half an hour from Jerusalem, roughly towards between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. If people must know, it was a known town during the Second Temple. He is also part of the Yavne crew and YBZ, Yochanan ben Zakkai. He's still part of that whole milieu. He was Rabbi Gamliel is a very, very big fan of his, and would, even though it was at a higher stature, would always go and seek out his opinion. He was interested in his opinion, and there's a theory that he was Bar Kochva, the famous Bar Kochva's uncle, and ultimately he gets killed by Bar Kochva due to fake news, so to speak. There's someone makes up a story about him, and it comes to his nephew's ear, and they think he's spying. They think he's ratting him out to the government. Either way, he gets killed. So that's, I guess, in general, some context of his. And there's there's a street named after him, which is a minute away from my current location. So it all comes full circle. So we say over here, HaMechalel et HaKedoshim, right? So we have someone that is profanes the Kedoshim. So there, Kedoshim, just in general, there's korbanot. There's things that that are sacrificed at the temple, and there's kodshim, are things that we haven't sacrificed yet. They're put aside and they're prepared to be used later on, and they're already considered holy. So there's an interpretation on the surface level that we're talking about just mistreating the animal itself, basically, like you're being cruel to this actual animal that you're bringing to the temple. Not taking the whole service in general seriously of bringing sacrifices to the temple. There's like a technical interpretation, which is once you have these kodshim, there's a certain period of time once it's sacrificed that it needs to be eaten. The certain portion of meat that you could take home with your family, it needs to be eaten in a certain time. And you lingering or dilly-dallying on that is showing that you're not taking the process seriously. However, there is and this is like the theme, as we'll continue to see, that goes a little deeper and says that this is really about someone that is having a hard time riding this tension of something that's holy and something that is in the process of being sanctified or evolving, basically, or ascending, which is this individual understands korbanot, as in he understands that there are some things that we could sacrifice, and that is like, I'm committing to something. But this middle ground of having these kedoshim, these holy things that have not yet been used, but they're in holy status, this to him is like a problematic stage, basically. And the preparation of these sacrifices, very much like the preparation of oneself, like in his day-to-day life, like when you're preparing to even do a good deed, or you're in the process of change. We are here commenting about someone that doesn't take that process seriously or doesn't see that process as holy.
So it's like, there is right, the process not being holy, so either rushing through it, or like he said, I mean, like you can delay it or not treat it with the respect that it's due.
Right. So I'd say there's me participating in it, but doing so half-assed, basically. And I am, I'm not keeping to the time schedule. or I am mistreating my animals. So I'm taking the process. I'm not looking at the process seriously, but I'm still participating in the process, to people that are more specifically saying this is really nonsense. Like this middle ground of like just the preparation of the sacrifice itself is a holy process. Like I'm not interested in that. But I'm saying the deeper level is what these processes here are here to symbolize, right? Like it's God specifically, as the prophets tell us. I'm not actually interested in your sacrifice that you're bringing. Rather, I'm interested in the whole process, and part of that process is also getting these things ready.
Right. Yeah. It makes me think about. I think Pirkei really puts it nicely when he talks about some of these rituals as rituals for transformation and not necessarily for what happens at the end. It's really for you to transform yourself. So, but if you're thinking, okay, I'll do this and this will happen, and I'll get this in return, that is not necessarily for some of these rituals, or for rituals. Technically, I don't remember how he puts it. The transformation is really the intended effect, is like what you go through and how you change.
Right, that process. So I believe that is what this section is stressing, and we're going to see it. We should see it. It should repeat itself in these next examples as well. So we have Hamavazeh et ha-mu'adot, and here we have degrades the festivals. So here too, you have specifically talking about Chol HaMoed, and in Chol HaMoed, this is a period which is, as in it's still holy days. However, there are many secular customs that you could still be doing throughout the day, basically. So I could still be driving my car, unlike the Sabbath, or the day, or the main holiday day itself. So like there's the days of the festival, which are specific days where I'm not lighting any lights or electricity, and there are specific things that I can't be doing. And then there's these other days of the week throughout the holiday period, which are still considered sacred. But here too, I'm allowed to still do relatively mundane things.
Does he mean Chol HaMoed, like those dates?
Correct. And then the question is back to this person, which is he's looking at these days and saying, listen, I can handle extremes. I can handle that you telling me right now it's the festival and I have to either fast or not, or do X or do Y, but I'm fully committed to this special day and I've ascended. I've reached the day. But telling me that there's like this other day that is like, yes, it's holy, but you can still go to work, or yes, it's holy, but you can still do the other things. Now, in practice, practically speaking, it's custom to, there's people that will only wear, let's say, white shirts during those days, or they'll make sure they're shaven, but they'll do little things that remind them that this day is still a holy day. But here too, you're seeing it's a stress on the fact that there is this balance that needs to be maintained. And we're talking about a person over here that is not interested in maintaining that balance.
Yeah, that's funny. Actually, it reminds me of a lot of conversations, especially that we touched on, like in some of the book clubs that either Rabbi Sachs talked about it, or Soloveitchik, about the idea of how you can, and I think you can talk about this in terms of having multiple interpretations for different things in the Torah, for example, how you can hold a few things in your head at the same time. So a few things, because they were talking about in terms of like the excluded middle, how that is not necessarily a logical perspective, a technical logical perspective that Judaism necessarily holds. So it's interesting because Chol HaMoed, like the things like that, those days in the middle, which are not Yom Tov, they're not the holiday itself, the main holiday, but they're not also just mundane days. There's somehow kind of like a combination of two, or kind of like they're more contextual or more subtle.
Agreed. And we'll see, like what you are alluding to. We should touch upon that when we're talking about the Torah knowledge over here as well. That someone's participating in. Okay, then we have someone that humiliates his friends in public. So here, first of all, in Hebrew, it's Hamalbin Pnei Chavero, which means you made his face turn like a ghost, like he turned white. There are versions, not the version we're reading over here, but I have seen versions where it's ma'adim, where its face becomes red, because generally speaking, if you get embarrassed, your face turns bright red. However, the Talmud talks about this, and they have a different continuation to this verse, which is anyone who humiliates his friend, shofech damim. It's as if you murdered him. And the interpretation over there with regards to the terminology we're using over here of white and red is initially your face goes red from embarrassment, but it's so traumatic that it's as if you were murdered and your blood leaves you and then your face becomes white. And here the text is just focusing on that part, which it says, Hamalbin pnei chavero, as in you humiliated your friend. The part of him becoming red has already happened. This is how, like, it was a horrible humiliation, and it's as if you you killed him over here. Like there was like sort of a murder happening over here, and sometimes it's worse than murder because murder, it ends at that point, but with humiliation it's continuous. So this is a transgression over here again, where we're saying that there's this balance over here that you didn't actually murder someone, but it's this middle ground where like this you are attacking his nefesh, you are attacking his spirit in a certain sense. And while you could come and say like, but I didn't harm the person, this middle ground, this middle stage over here is quite powerful in a negative sense.
Yeah, it reminds me of also, I think this was said by some Chabad rabbi, but it might be earlier as well. I'm trying to look at it because somebody said it in the synagogue a few days ago, where the Lashon Hara kills 3 people, or harms, or really it kills 3 people. The person who says it, the person who hears it, and the person it's intended to.
It's about right.
So it's even more. So in that sense, it's even more traumatic than just murder, just physically killing somebody.
Agreed.
So yeah.
V'hamafer brito shel Avraham Avinu alav hashalom. Okay, and here we're talking about circumcision. So there's like a technical term about this, which is like, it's sort of stretching your foreskin in a certain extent, which is like to cover the circumcision. Today, obviously, you could talk about like some sort of surgery, basically to hide this. But there's also a spiritual interpretation of this, which is really the reason we have the circumcision is because we are meant to be left incomplete, as in we're always trying to transcend and ascend and get closer to God. And this is, and we are created imperfectly, so there's room for us to perfect ourselves in a certain sense. And here too, that is all of that. The mark of the circumcision itself is letting you know that you are constantly in that balance and in that movement towards perfecting one yourself. But you're never at that point, like we said earlier. The focus is not the sacrifice, and the focus is not the Yom Tov, the holy day itself, or the fact that, let's say, you'll one day get back to being like uncircumcised. Rather, it's the process of always trying to get closer and recognizing that in between is where a lot of the work is happening.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know how common that was at the time, that they felt like it was necessary to talk about this.
Well, wasn't it common, like, let's say at that time, where people, if it's in Roman times, I guess, then you would have public baths. People will walk around nude most of the time.
Right.
So if you want to be part of that community, then, and you don't want to be ostracized, then you probably need to do something.
So there's an interpretation that this whole section 11 is really in reference to the Christians specifically. And that's why it also ends with saying that even if they did good deeds, but the idea was that they don't take the festival seriously anymore, and they're against the circumcision. So all this was just like sort of specifically aimed at them. However, that's not really the interpretation I'm driving with. Okay, v'hamegale panim b'Torah shelo kehalacha. And we're saying over here, he who interprets the Torah contrary to its true intent. Okay, and here too we have this is just English translation, but we have also the panim, the face of the Torah itself. Mm-hmm. So there's the basic understanding, which is one that's making like a mockery of the Torah. Okay, so that would be like a sort of like an obvious. There's misusing verses, as in you're going to take a verse that could sound, even though it's not relevant for the case you're making, and you're just going to stick it in over here, and you know better, obviously, and you're misusing the verses, or doubting the validity of, let's say, other verses, saying, let's say, these verses are not relevant, or these verses are not holy anymore. There's a sense of which is like publicly embarrassing or shaming like the Torah representatives, so like the rabbis, the leaders of the time, right? Mm-hmm. So that's like this is just like a different like interpretation of that. But and continuing with the trend we were talking about earlier, and like you alluded to earlier on, this is really dealing with and here it has to do with the panim in Hebrew, and the 70 faces of the Torah, which is if you are deciding to take the Torah, which is as we've learned and as we know, it's clearly something that's supposed to be done both spiritually and intellectually, but also embodied as well, right? But if you think it's one or the other and you could disconnect them, and again, the body is let's say focusing more on the part of like the process, right? As in the spiritual, I'm already there, but I still need to eat and I need to pray and I need a blessing. So that's all of that in-between space. So that is extremely important. And the fact that we are being called to be able to hold and spin a few discs simultaneously, mm-hmm. where you are taking different interpretations and different vantage points, basically, and trying to balance them together instead of just deciding that there's like one specific interpretation that you should be focusing on. So, and we conclude this with saying, and even though, because we just said this guy, the Joe Schmo, was pro sacrifices, he wasn't in the middle thing, and he was pro the main holidays, but not so, this guy might have good deeds, right? Mm-hmm. And we're talking about a guy that's like, he actually really tries. He's a good dude. Nevertheless, we say that he still doesn't have a share in the world to come. And putting aside the Christian answer we gave over here earlier, there's the sense of here that ultimately all this stems into a lack of belief in God, and that's why it throws him back into the heretic rubric, which we said earlier doesn't share a world in the world to come. Because if you believe that God is not interested in this balance, or he doesn't, or that this in between space is not also divine, then there's clearly there's a big lack in your belief and understanding of your relationship with God. And as we spoke about many times, there's ben adam lamakom, ben adam la'atzmo, and ben adam l'chavaro, a man to God, and a man to his fellow man, and a man to himself. And here as well, we see that it's the man that's mocking his fellow friend, and it's the man that's not taking the commandment between him and God seriously. And then even with himself and the circumcision, it's not seeing himself that way as well. So this person has transgressed on multiple levels in a really fundamental level, and that's why the phrase over here in the end that he has no share in the world to come, or the verdict, seemingly is fitting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like you might have said it, but I'm just repeating for myself, like the mevazeh, like when you embarrass somebody in public. So that could mean that you don't, again, you think there is this separation between, okay, what do I do with God? Like I can satisfy God with all the, if I do all the rituals, if I do all those practices, but it doesn't really matter for this world. Right. And then with the covenant of Abraham, circumcision, it's like, it's this sacrifice that you have to make that is really kind of like requires a lot of faith, because it's really between something you needing to make a sacrifice here in this world for this something, like you mentioned, it's like this spiritual bond between you and God. So it's also, it fits kind of what in my mind fits to what you said in terms of lack of faith, deep, like bitachon, I would say.
Being very unsecure and uncertain with your decision on that end. Correct. Could obviously be very, very discombobulating. All right. We continue.
Let's continue.
Do you mind scrolling down a little?
Yeah, if I find the window, I will. I will do that.
All right.
Let's see. Here we go.
Rabbi Yishmael. It's very sad. It's very sad that this name, Ishmael, it never really made it very far in the Jewish, name cycles throughout the years. Yishmael is not a name that we use really much anymore. Unfortunately, it's almost exclusively identified with our cousins. But God hears is a gorgeous, gorgeous name. And I hope one day I once sort of joked about with my wife saying maybe we'll call this to one of our sons, and she was like, gave me a very cold look. I was like, right, it's so funny. Okay. Anyways, Rabbi Ishmael. Oh, this is short and cute. Rabbi Ishmael Omer, Have kal larosh v'noch latishchorot v'have mekabel kol adam b'simcha. Rabbi Ishmael would say, be yielding to the leader, affable to the black-haired, and receive every man with joy. So like we said, Rabbi Ishmael, he, aside from his name that we love, he's the son of one of the high priests. So he has also memories of the second temple, also part of the Yavne crew, obviously, post-destruction. He was captive. He was released. From jail. What's specifically interesting about him is the fact that he was a chavruta, a study partner of Rabbi Akiva, the famous Rabbi Akiva. And they both have had distinct different methodologies of interpretation when it comes to the text. With Rabbi Akiva being a lot more, Heschel talks about this in his book, Torah Min HaShamayim, Torah from the Heavens, Mabat Baspaklaria B'malach HaDorot. That's the name in Hebrew. I don't know the name in English fully. And Heschel over there gives his basic framing is there's these two streams. There's Rabbi Ishmael, which is like the rationalist, and there's Rabbi Akiva, who is like the mystic, basically. But Rabbi Ishmael would also had his different techniques of interpretation. He had his own principles of interpreting the Torah as well. But again, he was a lot more streamlined with his interpretation and a lot more text based, I would say.
Is this Ishmael? Is that in the in Shacharit that you say like had me like the that mentions the derivation laws, or how you would say that? Rabbi Ishmael had like 13 principles of how.
Yeah, exactly that Rabbi Ishmael. So the 13 so the 13 principles of how to interpret the text in the Torah, correct? So he had his own methodology, like I said.
Right.
Is there anything else about Rabbi Ishmael? Oh, he was known for Say Yes to the Dress. You know that show about picking wedding dresses for women? The reason I know that is because my wife used to watch it. But he would spend a lot of money in like the beautification of like the women of Israel, basically. They say they all cried when he died because he took that very seriously as well. So okay, so we say over here, Have kal larosh v'noch latishchorot. So kal means kal kanesher, be quick, be don't dilly dally. If the elders, the rabbis are asking something of you, you should be very quick to assist them, basically. And the rosh over here means there's different interpretation. Rosh means head, so the head of the pack, the leader. Rosh also means like in Hebrew mean like koved rosh, like the people that deal like with the weighty things. And it's also the opposite of kal. Kal being light and the koved being something heavier. So basically, like you should be light for the people that need that are thinking heavy thoughts and are being bogged down by lofty discussions about the Torah.
Provide a balance, kind of that.
Correct. And we were being told the tishchoret, the black-haired, is also known as the young because their hair hasn't turned white yet. So it's not necessarily anyone with like black hair or blonde hair. It's just as in like you still have thick, dark hair. Mm-hmm. And there's some interpretation that we're talking about like just general authorities over here. Like anyone that like is in a position of power, you should be showing them respect and accommodating them. You see extreme versions of this, obviously, with Moses and Daniel, when Moses goes to Pharaoh and when Daniel goes to Nebuchadnezzar, which are obviously horrible people, yet they still accommodated them, and that's because of their honoring of the authorities, basically, mm-hmm. Of someone that's in the head via that interpretation. Here too, you're seeing the sort of the stress of that balance, which is we want the young to recognize the old and be there for them to assist them and recognize their stature. However, we want the old, like we're saying over here, that affable to the black-haired, we want the old to leave room for the young to innovate and be sort of to move forward and excel and eventually evolve. So it's sort of a joint dance that needs to be done together.
What is
sorry, go ahead.
What is Noach? Why is Noach specifically? Like here they say affable, but why did they use the word Noach to the young?
I think you need to be Noach, here it says affable, but let's say comfortable with that situation because it's ongoing. It's not something that we're going to ask you to deal with like only once. And this also connects to like the last line, which is Havei mekabel kol adam b'simcha. And in general, again, there's two interpretations of that, which is one, anyone at your level, like there's people that are above you that you need to be just quick to give them what they want. And it's less about their attitude. But anyone that's on your level, you should just be like happy to see them and greet them with joy. Or you could interpret that it's going back to the process we're talking about earlier. There's going to be this gap between the young and the old. And to have that changing of the guards and to have that relationship, it requires the young recognize the old leaves space for the young, and all of it has to be happening through joy. Mm-hmm. And you're only going to be able to do that if you're comfortable in your place. And if you realize that like I'm gladly letting the young blossom in their own way. If I'm going to come and tell them like this is the only way you can interpret and this is the only way you could learn, obviously there's going to be more problematic.
Yeah. So let me ask you now, the mekabel kol adam b'simcha. So this is just going to be a Hebrew grammatical thing, but I'll explain. But kol ha'adam, it's almost they're saying is the man. So is there an interpretation of like when it says mekabel kol adam b'simcha, it's not accept all people, but accept the person as the full person in front of you with all his bad things and good things with joy, right? Because the proposition there makes it seem at least like that.
I've not heard that. I'm just going to repeat what you said just to make sure I understand it. But basically, you're saying that if we were just talking about man in general, it would say kol adam, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you're the man, or and you're saying this is to be inclusive of the man in his totality, basically.
Yeah.
So while I have not heard that interpretation, I like the interpretation and I'm willing to accept that interpretation.
And we will enter it into the books.
We enter it into the books, exactly. Baruch shekivanta. So yes, that is a good diuk, as they say, a good aim. Any other questions on this one?
No, I was just curious about how the third clause fits the rest, but you just explained it, so that was good. But that was my only one.
But say there. We move on. Rabbi Akiva. Wait, what's the one after this? Okay, I think actually Yeah, that's a bigger one. Maybe we'll see. What time is it? 40 minutes in. Okay, maybe we'll end on 13 and we'll continue 14 next week. Okay, Rabbi Akiva. צחוק וקלות ראש מרגילין את האדם לערווה. מסורת סייג לתורה. מעשרות סייג לאושר. נדרים סייג לפרישות. סייג לחוכמה, שתיקה. Rabbi Akiva would say, jesting and frivolity accustom a person to promiscuity. Tradition is a safety fence to Torah. Tithing is a safety fence to wealth. Vows, a safety fence for abstinence. A safety fence for wisdom is silence. And specifically that last portion is something that is very common in Israel, as all teachers tell that to all their students constantly while they're talking.
What's one of the most well-known.
Right.
Okay. Instead of saying shut up, they would
basically saying shut up. I'm just going to look for a second at the comments over here. Andrew, nice to see you that you're here, if you're still here.
I did have our haircuts, if that's what he's referring to.
And hey, what's up? Yason, Jason, it's good to see you too, sir. Okay, so Rabbi Akiva, for those who are watching, so Rabbi Akiva.
I think there was one question there.
Yeah, 1 second. Oh, I missed that. Is the line by yielding to a leader associated with Proverbs 24:21? We'll have to open that up and check.
Let me see. I don't know if we have the same.
Mishlei. What number did he say?
24:21.
24:21. Kaf. 21. Kabbalah. V'yired nevecha im shonim al titarev. Yired Adonai b'nei v'melach im shonim al tarev. I need to think about that, and I'll get back to you. Let me write this down for a second because I'm interested. Kohelet 24:21. Okay, we'll get back to that. Okay, so Rabbi Akiva, serious heavy hitter.
Yeah.
And famously, I mean, very, very famous, obviously. He did a lot of the organization of the Masorah that we have. And he was known, like I said earlier, his chavruta, his study partner was Rav Yishmael. He had a very unique and robust methodology, interpretation methodology, and he was known to interpret the crowns on letters. Some give that specifically as in the way the letter is built, its shape itself had deep meaning. Some say that meaning the crowns, meaning that he would interpret the essence, the base of the letter itself, as in the crown being like its glory of each word, and each letter has its most glorious interpretation. He was one of the four who entered the Pardes, the Kabbalistic worlds of secret and holy wisdom. And one died, one went crazy, one became a heretic, and he went in peace and comes out in peace. It's famous. He warns his friends what they're gonna see, and what they should be very careful with their assumptions and what they interpret. So that was a very famous story of his. Due to his foresight and his very vast and flexible interpretation talents, I don't know if I want to say flexible, just is very deep and wide wide-ranging understanding and interpretation of the Torah allowed him, at a very famous story, when he was walking with his friends and they saw the destruction of the temple, and they see a fox walking through the Holy of Holies, and his friends start crying, and he's laughing, and they're saying, "How can you be laughing?" He says, "Well, up until now, I wasn't sure that the words of the prophet will come true about the destruction. But now that I see that the destruction came through, I also know that the eventual redemption will also come, basically." So he was very much like silver lining. And, I think that kind of delving into the essence of things allows you in many cases to see the light, even though times could be extremely dark. So may his foresight and wisdom, be with us today as well. So, any questions about Rabbi Akiva, or moving on?
Rabbi Akiva is the person who married. So he has is he the person that has a very famous story that he married a woman and she convinced him to go to yeshiva, and is he a convert or he just didn't know?
Right. So he comes from a very, very simple background. He didn't know how to read. He didn't know how to write. And the story goes that he works for this very, very rich man, Kalba Savua, and he loves his daughter. They fall in love, but she says, "I want you to go study." There's a story where he says, "I can't study. I've been learning and nothing's going in my head." And she shows him like a stone, and she says, like, "Look how water falls on this." And after like a long time, eventually the water makes its indentation into the stone. Like, don't worry, like eventually it's going to it's going to influence you. But he goes and he studies, and then he comes back, and he hears from the side of the window after like 12 years that he's gone, she hears his wife say, "I would be happy if he studied for another 12 years. Like, I'm so into him doing this." And he goes back and studies for another 12 years, and he comes back, and then he has all these students, and he's the famous Rabbi Akiva, and his daughter and his wife comes out to meet him, but the students stop her because she's like, "Who are you? Some random lady coming to Rabbi Akiva?" He's like, "No." And he says, "Sheliva shelachem shelahi," as in anything that you learned or anything that I learned, really, it's all due to her, and she owns it all. And he gives her this beautiful golden pendant that we don't know how it looks like, but it's called Jerusalem of Gold, Yerushalayim Shel Zahav. That's like where we also get that name from. I have read interpretations. Jacob is not going to like this, so I'm sorry, Jacob. But there are parallels between Jacob, the patriarch, and Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Akiva is in some places called Ukba, and Jacob is called Ukba. And Jacob marries Rachel, and Rabbi Akiva marries a woman named Rachel. And Jacob needs to work for double the amount of time at Laban's house to get his wife, and Rabbi Akiva needs to study for double the amount of time till he gets his wife. And Jacob has 12 sons, and Rabbi Akiva famously had 12,000 pairs of students, 24 total. And all his students die because of called sinat chinam, as in hate between themselves for no reason, for no good reason. And this obviously was a big issue with the brothers, with Joseph, with all their infighting as well. So does that mean Rabbi Akiva was not a real person? I don't think it means that. I think we have Rabbi Akiva, that we have Jacob, which is the father of the nation of Israel, and we have Rabbi Akiva that in many sense at that time was the father of the Torah of Israel. So I think there were some pattern placements, but perhaps it's all fractal, and we just see this repeating itself again and again. But so that's the Rabbi Akiva person. But again, Jacob may disagree with my interpretation, my comparative interpretation over there. Yeah. So we are told schok vekalut rosh margilin le'erva. So jesting and frivolity accustom a person to promiscuity. So I think the issue that we could be focusing on over here is because, generally speaking, there's nothing wrong with laughing. We're being talking about this combination of jesting and frivolity. Together, these things become, well, let's take a step back. Laughing in general is a very freeing sort of no boundaries experience. So because it's very freeing, it could, in theory, lead you to places which are like chaotic. Okay, and that's like sort of where the problem, where there aren't boundaries, and when there's no boundaries, it starts with like, I can marry my neighbor, I can marry my husband's wife, I can marry my mother. Like, those relations start becoming, those boundaries start disappearing basically when I'm in like laughter comedy mode, obviously. And we talk about this, how comedians push the boundaries, right? That's because in the laughter mode, those things could happen. While that could be also a great thing, it also is a dangerous thing. Here also, we're talking about, do they translate this? Do they translate it in English? No. Oh yeah, custom. So margilin, you're also making this part of your day. This is becoming a custom. This is becoming a habit that you have of taking these two improper behaviors, or seemingly one of these improper behaviors, and combining it together ultimately puts you in a space where it's not only just a moment of jest or this natural response of laughter. Rather, it's a artificial condition that you created yourself and mindset you created yourself, where this is what is happening in your life right now, and that ultimately would lead you to a place where there's no boundaries. The reason I'm mentioning and stressing the fact that here you're talking about this combination, and in classic Kabbalist form, like to flip it on his head, there's an interpretation of here which is saying laughter, if done properly, right? Laughter, which is when you get to a point where I've gotten to the edge of my cognitive abilities. So this is what the Talmud talks about. That's when the rabbis would start making some jokes. When they realized we can no longer discuss the topic seriously because we've reached our limit, we need to now create this open space, this chaotic space where new ideas could be happening. And there's a sense, there's an interpretation, which is the erva, right? The promiscuity, or the forbidden fruit, so to speak. That is another name for the secrets of the Torah, the Kabbalah, the mystic things of the Torah, which is, those are things that you're not supposed to show, just like private parts of the body is something that you hide. Also, the deep essence of the Torah, you also hide. And the only time those things could be revealed is if you're a place sort of laughter, so to speak, where there's a space where you are beyond the general analytical mind you have. Rather, you're in a place where there's this joyous space of ecstasy. But again, that's sort of like a 360 a 180 interpretation.
Right. Okay, so this is like the Kabbalistic positive
right
interpretation. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I just think it's important to look at it as laughter as a very powerful tool in our toolkit. However, if done a custom and done together as frivolity, right, or kalut rosh, that's where it becomes very dangerous.
Yeah, I think it's probably, maybe this is an argument about, I don't know the best way to put it, but like about correlation, right? Where like in places where you have the like jesting and frivolity, then there is a correlation, or there's more probability that promiscuity might be involved. Like, so you need to be careful. This is kind of like I don't like if the foot in the door argument, or, if some activities are associated with each other. It doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that every time there is jesting, there is always promiscuity, but it means that where there is jesting, there's a higher probability that there might be something else associated with that. So,
well, definitely if it's jesting and frivolity, and definitely if it's also a custom. So, I mean, there's a real sense of here that if you are a professional comedian, like a stand-up comic, and you're just chilling with Joe Rogan all the time, some could say that that's like a place, that's not a good place to be chilling.
Yeah.
It's hard because we obviously look at comedians as like, champions, but if you listen to these comedian stories many times and they're hanging out, like obviously like it does become very vile many times. The conversations become very intense. You hear about like these nut stories that they have between them. So you and it's where you push the boundaries, where you could actually come up with like that comedic gold, but you had to go through a lot of muck.
Pay a price. Yeah, for sure.
Yes.
And I had something I forgot, I think.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
You want to try to get back to it, or moving on?
No, you can go ahead. If I remember it, I'll let you.
Okay. We then say Masoret Siag LaTorah. Tradition is a safety fence to the Torah. So I actually don't love the term necessarily fence, even though that is the term most people use, which is you create many fences.
Mm-hmm.
Just a note about the fences, which is at some point people need to realize what's a fence and what's actually been commanded of us. There are times where people make fences of fences, and then they look at like the fence 3 times removed as if God specifically requested that as well. So that also many times could create problems when if someone is raised a certain way and is being told that these fences are actually part of, let's say, they're part of like biblical text, and then they find out years later that that's just something that like my mom was really pushing.
Right.
That obviously could create a dissonance when trying to then cultivate that relationship. But either way, I'm looking at the siag, the fence, is something more that you do internally to allow you to enhance the experience you're supposed to be having, basically. So it's a fence. I'm trying to think about what a good example of this would be, but
it sounds more like a ladder from where. What do you mean internal that helps you experience?
This is coming up right now just because I recently saw this with my son. But if you ever saw Black Panther or any one of those movies, so Black Panther's his shield, his armor, anytime it gets hit, it absorbs the impact and eventually could release it out as like this boom. Right. So I'll say these fences are here to, yes, protect you, but ultimately allow you to manifest a much stronger output.
Sounds a little bit like I think Taleb has this idea, and Nassim Taleb has this idea of robustness, like a human, like a bone. A bone doesn't only, like if you hit it, if you hit it too hard, it breaks. But if you hit it just right, in the right power and in consistency, it becomes stronger. So it's robust. It's not fragile or strong. I don't remember.
So there's something called Newtonian fluid, and it's a fluid, but if you hit it, it immediately becomes extremely, extremely like a solid, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be like another example of that. So when we're talking about tradition is the safety fence of the Torah. So what are we talking about tradition over here? So one is the dikduk. The Masorah is also known as not only the tradition, but there's a specific tradition of how to read the verses of the Bible, the proper punctuation, the proper wording. And this gives like the whole frame towards the Bible. So like that one is just like in a very basic sense, like the actual skill of knowing and discerning with the proper interpretations and punctuations of the text. And that's why it's very much like you learn according to your rabbi, because you have to make sure that goes down in tradition. There's another interpretation that talks about the oral Torah, right? The oral Torah, which is part of the tradition of the written Torah, is its safety, right? They go hand in hand, and you always have to be studying these things together. Now, this is something that we mentioned like earlier, which is because there's the 70 facets or the 70 faces of the Torah, one could in theory go astray because there's so many options, right? Like I'm at this smorgasbord right now of options of Judaism, and I could pick and choose very quickly. You could find yourself off the reservation. So the idea is that like if you are going to swim in this sea of multiplicity, you still have to have the tradition which anchors you back down to some sort of unity, to some sort of baseline, because otherwise you could find yourself being lost. So we're embracing the options, but we want to make sure that you're tethered properly.
Right, holding a perspective, holding a consistent perspective. Yeah.
Right. So that's, I think, so allowing someone to like helping a person maintain like a fence, is you're actually allowing him to like enhance like his actions themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you want to be studying Torah properly, you need to maintain this tradition fence, basically.
Yeah.
I guess my point is to stress that we're not just keeping things out. Rather, we're building ourselves a framework and borders just because we want to orient ourselves. The border is not necessarily to keep the neighbor out, rather for me to know my position properly. I'm not everywhere right now.
Yeah. No, I mean that's a good point. In addition to the fact that tradition is a treasure trove of tools and insight that you can use to connect to Torah. So in that sense, that is also something that helps you absorb Torah and connect to it.
Correct. Then we have Masrot Siyak Osher. So that's fairly, or I'll humbly say that I don't remember hearing a different interpretation for this one, which is just very text-based, which is like, if you make sure you're giving to the other, you recognize that your money, we mentioned this earlier, that shelcha v'shelo, like everything that you own is really God's ultimately. Mm-hmm. So if that's the mindset you're in, you yourself, it's offense to be wealthy. Now, there's an interpretation of it as in God will provide because you did a good deed, or just the mindset that even if you are physically poor, right? That doesn't mean that you're not spiritually and emotionally still wealthy if you maintain that kind of mindset of still giving and recognizing that ultimately it's all God's.
Yeah.
Here too, which is like sort of enhancing and creating a framework, which is nedarim strag la prishut. So vows are safety for abstinence. So in theory, taking a vow, right, or saying going cold turkey from something, is a good tool to break a habit. However, deciding to go cold turkey and I'm never having this again is again like it's going too far in a certain sense, and that's why the Torah comes and says we have the laws of vows. So the laws of vows allow you to play in those waters of like, I need to have like a more extreme response right now. I need to take the Nazirite vow. But even that, it ends after 30 days or after a year, or there's different rules of how to work around these things. And while it's happening within the system, it doesn't become a all or nothing sort of extreme expression of your desires or your will. Rather, it's still happening within a framework.
Right. So it's a safe place for you. It's a safe system for you to kind of like break down or
correct
do something. Or do something that doesn't require you to go extreme and just be totally abstinent. That also from the perspective of the relationship with God is something that you don't want to do because you want to enjoy in a good way. You want to enjoy the all of the world.
Right, which is why, as we mentioned in the past, the Nazirite brings at the end of his period, of his vow period, he brings a sacrifice to the temple because ultimately he's transgressed because God allows him to cut his hair and God allows him to drink wine, but he decided to exclude himself from God's gift. So here too, it's God says in a certain sense, or the system says, we understand that you needed to go cold turkey for a month, a year, whatever. But welcome back to the fold. So we made sure that you have a way to come back, because otherwise you'd find yourself like, I should have never have made that crazy vow that now got me stuck. Mm-hmm. And secondly, now that you're back, you should still recognize that, it was a little intense what you did.
Yeah.
So I think that's obviously very grounding. Specifically in this, like the Rambam believes that we're talking about like, keeping away from like unholy things in general. Mm-hmm. So that was just his like interpretation. And I don't know if it's not Maimonides, but there's an interpretation that we're talking about misusing God's name, or saying God's name in vain, basically, which is what this was talking about. Or has to do with Shema Mefarash, the Tetragrammaton, which is Perush, Prishut. So they're playing with that as well. And our last one is a safety fence for wisdom is silence. So continuing with the trend we just said earlier, and in the earlier section beforehand about creating this balance, here too, it's not a fence, which is like you should make sure you're keeping silence out, or like we're going to bring wisdom in if you're silent, basically, but rather that if you talk too much, you might have a misconception that the things you're actually saying are true, right? That's all you're hearing, basically, and you're sort of locked into your own patterns and your own your own set of the things that you're going to run with, basically, on automatic. But there's another sense, like you were mentioning, which is if we were saying about like laughter is another point where you could like reach higher heights. Mm-hmm. Silence is, in a certain sense, like it's like your body is letting you know that there's a conflict that you still haven't experienced necessarily, and you don't really know what to say at that moment. And people have a hard time being in that quiet. And this also relates to waking up in the middle of the night or walking alone in the street. Like we said, like those are the moments not to pick up your phone and not to doom scroll. Rather, that's the moment to like zone in and be like, I want to be present. I want to be introspective. So here too, there's a moment where like you were caught, someone said something and like you don't know what to say, or they have something that like it stumped you.
Yeah.
We have a knee-jerk reaction to still say something or express ourselves, but rather if we're quiet, that's the moment where you could actually reach, those are the building blocks of new code being written in that silence. And then you could actually emerge with a new idea. There's obviously the idea that other people are talking, be quiet, so you could hear what they're saying, mm-hmm. and then respond back properly, obviously, when you hear those different vantage points as well.
Yeah.
The last thing on this, which is more of like a more anecdotal, is that there is an interpretation, which is the safety fence for wisdom is silence. Wisdom being the secrets of the Torah, being Kabbalah, and the reason it's the secrets of the Torah. Well, it's obvious why it's the secrets of Torah, but there was a rabbi that was very upset that he heard people were talking about the Kabbalah on the streets. This is like in the 1700s, I believe. Mm-hmm. And when he means like people were talking, it was like two people, basically. But for him, this was like horrible that like it reached that level because like, the secrets are out, sort of. Right. However, Rabbi Cook believed that now is the time, 100 years ago is the time where there's no more like, we could no longer be silent about these things. Like that was a fence that we needed through the exile. But now when we're back in our land, it is time to only speak through the language of our Torah secrets because they're no longer secrets, basically. And obviously over the years, as mysticism made its way and all the different philosophies have matured. So Rav Kook is saying, like, we have our equivalent and we should be having this conversation now being discussed out in the open, mm-hmm. Which, like Seekers of Unity and then many channels like in this little corner that we see. Obviously, I believe all those conversations are extremely healthy.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm just going to go read through a few more comments.